Hey, what do you say? This is Bobby Blitz from Overkill and BPMD. That's right. We are blowing it up on MetalgodZradiO. Means you're in the right place.
Are you still there?
Yeah, we're all in this together is my thinking. But what I'm doing during this this strange time is trying to keep things as normal as possible. For instance, eating well, making sure I'm still exercising. I'm riding my motorcycle, working on my cars. I'm writing an Overkill record with Dee Dee and the rest of the boys. We're demoing stuff from afar, but we're looking to get together in the next month to do it in person. So I think somewhere in the whole mentality of business as usual, there's some comfort in a time when when things seem so upside down.
And what does your morning ritual of liquid look like? Any snake oil remedies?
No snake oil. I do a little CBD, which has always helped me. Has helped me over this last year. Stay a little bit more active. I mean, just kind of dulls some of those war wounds I got on the road over all these years. I'm a big guy. I like a lot of fruit in the morning, things like that. I take walks. I got an old Harley. I got a couple old Chevrolets outside. So, when somewhere around 6 o'clock, I'm cracking a Heineken and listening to some metal.
Nice. That would be a morning ritual of liquid. Are you superstitious at all? Do you black cats, umbrellas, and ladders? Those things ever make you stop and think?
Not necessarily. I mean, things like that will get my attention, of course. But it's not something I really buy into with any depth. I kind of look at them as unusual circumstances as opposed to life-changing or, mind-tangling events. Just something that I'll remember, but not necessarily something that changes my approach to things.
Have you ever marched in a parade or marched with protesters protesting?
I haven't marched with protesters. I mean, I've seen some of them. I've seen some of them in, places around the world even. I remember being in France. I was in a city called Lyon, and I wanted to go into the city. I was staying in a hotel outside. I had a day off, so I found a bus in, and then I found, a subway in, and people were real helpful. This will lead you right to the square. The square's dead center of the city. You'll love it. It's beautiful. I got out of the subway. I looked around. I said, "Oh, look, they're having a festival." And then somebody started throwing rocks and bottles in my direction. So I said, "Look at all these cops."
Yeah, the cops in France carry machine guns. I was there last year, and they got some heavy-duty arsenal strapped around their necks.
I remember it was a labor riot. And it became a national. It's a national thing. It wasn't just in Lyon, but it was in Marseille. It was in Paris. Strasbourg, and so the labor riot was national at that particular day during that particular time, and it's something that is common to their culture and their. I'm not going to say their way of life, but something that is ingrained into their history, including that of the current day.
And you said that you'd never marched in a parade.
Oh, in a parade. I mean, when I was a kid, maybe when I was like a Cub Scout or something. I mean, it's I don't remember myself, waving a flag or anything or carrying a banner. Maybe, like I said, maybe as a kid, as a Cub Scout, something like that, but not in anything as an adult now.
Whose idea was BPMD initially, and is the acronym in order of age?
It actually isn't. If it was, I think Mengi would be at the end. I think it would be BDPM. But I got the top spot because of they're saying age before beauty. I'm saying, hey, listen, I got both. Sorry that you got left out. But it was. But the idea for the project was Mark's son, Alex had heard, one of the cuts that we ended up doing, piping out of the stereo in the backyard while Mark was flipping burgers and dogs and having a beer and, barbecue with his kids. And said, Dad, you got to cover this. And he said, it doesn't fit Metal Allegiance. And he said, you should still cover it. And, he thought to himself, he actually has a point, because Mark had some good chemistry with some guys through Metal Allegiance, especially Mike. And it was starting to accumulate that with myself because I'd written with him and done plenty of songs with him, over the last few years. So he gave me a call and asked me what I thought. And for me, it wasn't a very hard decision because, I grew up in this era. This was some of the stuff I cut my teeth on was, the early Van Halen or Blue Oyster Cult or Mountain or Cactus, Grand Funk. So it was asking me to transform myself from 2019 back into 1970. So it was a welcome departure. And besides, I had a roadmap. I'd been there. I'd already been there. So it was a spontaneous idea that was accelerated by the fun that we would have in our heads going back to that era.
Which of your picks made it and didn't make it?
Everybody got 2 picks. So you had to think about them. And we had some loose rules around it. It was 2 picks each and then two community picks. You couldn't veto the other guy's pick. And you can't keep changing your pick. That was it. It was just real simple. Had to be American, had to be the 1970s. So my picks were done right away on that first phone call. I said my first pick was Mountain, Never in My Life. Overkill had toyed with the idea of doing that. And then I picked Cactus, a song by Cactus, a presentation, a release called Evil, which was actually originally written in the 50s by Willie Dixon in Chicago. But the point of why I picked them was because a lot of the phrasing in these songs, the vocal phrasing, are things that I've kept over the years. I mean, if I cut my teeth on Aerosmith, Ted Nugent, Mountain and Cactus, then, and I've kept that with me and not forgot that trait that walked me into rock and roll, it would be a perfect time to reuse them because I have pulled them out of the bag every now and then, even with Overkill releases.
I really like the double bass on Saturday Night Special, and obviously your vocals. In particular, it seems like you got to run amok a little on it.
That's a good point. I mean, it sounds like a rolling train, which I always thought was really cool. I think Mike adapted a double bass pattern in lieu of the original snare pattern. So I think that one of the ideas of doing this record was to keep the integrity of the original, play the notes that were supposed to be there, but to reimagine them. And once I heard that double bass pattern, it gave me that opportunity to kind of run amok on it, open my throat, present it more like a metal song than it was, for instance, a southern rock, classic rock tune of the 1970s, but updated into the current era.
How was the tracking decided?
The order?
Correct.
Well, the order was really simple. We knew American Band was going to be last. We just had to figure out what was going to be first. And I don't know if you've heard the whole record yet, but we opened with Wang Bang 3.10. And there's a great version off of Double Live Gonzo where Ted Nugent goes into this rant for about 60 seconds or 90 seconds about rock and roll, about Nashville, about, if you don't want to get mellow, you get the fuck out, et cetera, that kind of a thing. So I did kind of an adaptation of that intro. So if you hear the original and then you hear my adaptation, it was obvious that should open the record because it's just it's just an introduction into the record. It's not necessarily word for word what Ted was saying on the original. And then I think we picked between 1 and 10. We just kind of voted on it and just kind of slid them in according to what we thought with regard to popularity. There wasn't like a lot of disagreement with this record. I mean, the whole point was to not disagree. The point about this record was to have a good time and walk out of there with a smile on your face as opposed to, and remember why you started doing this stuff, as opposed to say, no, this is much better than that. There was none of those kind of, that kind of dialogue.
Were you in bands back in the day that were part of the cover band circuit in that area that you come from?
Oh, sure. I was in bands in high school and in college. I was in college in the Bronx, New York City, where I would play a lot of the pubs that, at college, that right off the college campus. I had done, even Overkill in the early days was playing some of the Jersey and Staten Island and New York circuit with, as Overkill, but doing covers. So it was, something for sure I was used to. It wasn't like, oh, this is a first-time experience for me. I was born a songwriter or born a lyricist. It wasn't that. I became that. I was born a guy in a cover band.
Which of the songs are the most challenging and easiest vocally?
Well, for me, it was probably Van Halen's DOA. This is, as much as I appreciated Van Halen and thought that they were groundbreaking, especially with regard to guitar first, and then second, excitement. So meaning Eddie, then David Lee Roth, and Alex Van Halen, incredible. I mean, all of them great musicians. But I never considered myself somebody who would ever present something David Lee Roth had presented. I mean, there's one David Lee Roth. I mean, love him or hate him, or love or hate me. There's one. And I think that that's kind of the cool thing about it, that originality. So I really had to, that was one of Phil Demmel's picks. He's a California kid. So, when he presented DOA, I was like, man, I'm going to really have to dig into this. This is going to be some work. So I'm not going to say I hated it, but I do think it's one of my bigger accomplishments and the one that took me the most time to have come to fruition.
And you said the Overkill machine is about to pick up some steam, right?
Oh, sure, yeah. I mean, we're deep into the demos at this point. I mean, there's 10 songs. My little studio is beckoning me over here to come over and finish one of them. It's blinking red light is on.
Have you given thought to performing at drive-ins?
Well, yeah, somebody presented it to me. It wasn't presented from a serious note of I have this set up, but what would I think of it? For me, it didn't really trip my trigger. I don't mind people thinking out of the box. I don't necessarily know that that's for Overkill or our genre. And this is thinking for myself, not thinking for other people. I think one of the things that make Overkill happen is that it's a very close, personal relationship we have with an audience. You can't do an Overkill show without an audience. You can't do a lot of shows without an audience. You couldn't do a Slayer show without an audience. The audience actually becomes the next member of the band. In Overkill's case, the sixth member. For instance, in Slayer's case, the fifth member of the band. Without that member there, I think it lacks. Sure, it's a performance. You get to see it. But the energy that an audience gives a band and the band gives an audience is what makes thrash metal shows explode or makes them, let's say, unique unto themselves, that you can't just do, a lip sync-ish type approach to things.
And finally, which of the bands covered back in the day did you get to see live?
Oh, geez, I saw plenty of them. I saw Ted. I saw ZZ Top in the early 70s. I think they released Fandango. I saw them, I think I saw both of them at the same place as Asbury Park, New Jersey, a place called Casino Arena. They had two concert halls on, there were piers that go out into the Atlantic Ocean, and they had some great stuff there. I mean, I've seen Slayer at one of those places. I've seen, oh, God, who else did I see down there? Judas Priest, I saw down there. So, I mean, this was, when I was young, this was the place to go. So I saw ZZ, I saw Ted, I saw Aerosmith. I didn't see Grand Funk, Cactus or Mountain. Saw Blue Oyster Cult, but that was later on. Saw Van Halen back in the day. So it was, I probably saw more than 50% of the bands I'd seen live that are on the BPMD record.
And finally, do you have any thoughts you'd like to share with some people that might be listening to this? Words of wisdom.
Well, it's a difficult time. I mean, just as you and I were talking about, it's difficult, but it doesn't mean it's undoable. I'm hopeful. I think that this is a resilient country. That some of the great ideas that we have come out of our darkest times. I mean, there's a great old expression: "It's always darkest before the dawn." So I think that no matter where you are with regard to this, it's chin up and hopeful should rule the day, because it gets you to the next step and into the next day.